Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Sean Blackburn with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Antoine Woods Jr. He is the president and senior strategist over at Cultural Sync. Antoine, how are you doing today?
I am great. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. I'm excited to have you on the show, and our topic today is one that I think our audience could get a lot of value from: the 4 most common branding mistakes and how to avoid them. But before we jump in here, if you could just tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what it is that you guys do over at Cultural Sync.
Yeah, so Cultural Sync is a branding and communication strategy agency dedicated to helping business leaders build and position their brands for growth and influence in the market. And we're based in Atlanta, Georgia. And as an agency, we firmly believe that those who have the privilege of leading a brand in today's society must realize that the level of success their business will achieve in the market is directly associated with their ability to clearly communicate who they are, what they do, and why it matters. Because consumers are no longer looking to just buy from a brand, they're looking to join it. And we help organizations achieve this.
That's a great talking point right there, right off the bat, the idea of joining a brand rather than just buying from one. Whenever you say that, unpack that maybe a little bit before we jump into some of the content.
Yeah, so great question. So, overall, we found that people purchase or use your brands for 2 reasons. Number one, because it solves a problem they're having. And the second reason is based on emotion. So, of course, starting out, the emotion part is not there yet. So you offering a particular solution to solve their problem on a consistent basis allows them to, build a connection with you. As long as you had that sound messaging and you're consistently delivering on that, that emotional element comes into play. And that allows them to actually believe in what you're doing, believe in what you're offering, and actually, become part of the brand and in some ways become an organic brand ambassador for their product, to where they're actually promoting your products or services to people that they know, without even being prompted to do so.
I love that. And so people are wanting to join the company in solving this problem for them. I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. And a lot of times just the word brand can kind of be synonymous with company, but how would you define the term branding?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And to answer that, let's take a look at the meaning of the term brand. So in my professional opinion, your brand is your reputation. And branding is the process of reputation building, which is achieved by developing elements that differentiate you from others in your category, like defining your positioning, creating a logo, a tagline, a website color scheme, your messaging, and so on. And these things combine together to create a visual and verbal identity for your brand that stands out from the rest in your category or industry.
I really like that. So we're talking a reputation here. How should listeners start the brand positioning process and start that process of building that reputation?
Yeah, so I think starting the process of positioning begins by you asking yourself the question, who are we? Who are we at our core? And that question will start you down the path of positioning, because your positioning starts with what we consider your brand DNA, which is your vision statement, mission statement, core values, and mindset. And these 4 elements set the tone for who you are as a brand and guide the completion of the positioning process. which in our eyes consist of 12 elements.
Interesting. Could you hit maybe those 12 real quick?
Yeah, to go over them quickly. So to completely establish your positioning in a particular category or market consists of your, as just mentioned, your vision statement, mission statement, your core values, your company mindset, defining who you are, what you do, who you do it for, your brand promise, defining your category, defining your differentiation, your value proposition, and your positioning statement. And I know that was a mouthful. And what I'll do, I'll provide you with some links that can, easily clarify that for the listeners if they want to know more about each.
Well, I like that though, and obviously 12 is quite a list, but I think that those building blocks are super helpful for people to, even just take, what is their established brand, even if they've been doing business for many years, and they can kind of measure themselves off of a metric of those building blocks. Do I have these things in place?
So what we found is that most to all successful brands have a clear understanding of 4 distinct areas of the branding process. And so we developed our brand focus framework to simplify that process. And so those 4 elements are number 1, your brand DNA. So understanding your positioning. Number 2, defining your target audiences. Number 3 is defining your messaging. And number 4 is defining your communication strategy. And the reason these 4 are so important is because, of course, before anyone else can believe in who you are or what you're doing, you have to understand that and believe and champion that yourself, which is conducted and solidified in that first step in defining your brand DNA. So once you get those 12 steps of positioning together, you have a pretty good roadmap for moving forward for who you are, as a company and what you're offering. So then the second part, which is defining your target audiences. So now that you know who you are, it's time to understand who your key demographic is.
Right.
So you're able to make sure that what you're offering is connecting with those you feel are your target. So once you define that target, you're then able to define your brand messaging, which happens based off you first knowing who you are. Now you know who your target is. Now you can develop strategic communications to make sure that what you're saying is actually connecting and moving them to make a purchase or support your initiative. And then that fourth and final, your communication strategy, is kind of going back to where I was saying, kind of understanding is if you have a customer that's on Instagram and not on Twitter, there's no need to place investment in Twitter or a platform where your customer is not. So once you define where your customer is, it allows you to kind of lay out okay, so us having our website, or us doing a video series or a podcast, or writing articles, or it may be social media marketing, it allows you to kind of take a step back and see where your audience is and develop initiatives and campaigns for those specific mediums to ensure that you're reaching that audience. And a lot of times what happens is that, as business leaders, we get an idea and we just jump right into it. We get a website done, we get some business cards, and we're pushing forward. And we often have to take a step back and we realize is that, hey, do we really know who we are as a brand? Do we know who our audience is? Are we just throwing money out hoping that it touches someone when we could take a step back and save thousands of dollars by investing that in the strategic process, which provides a roadmap. So everything we do moving forward is cohesive and it's getting us to a particular benchmark in which we're trying to achieve.
I think that's super helpful. So thanks for sharing that.
All right, today's growth story revolves around search engine marketing, and we'll be shining the spotlight on Aegis Software, a company that makes software for manufacturing operations. Aegis was one of the first companies in their space to invest in search marketing, but as competition grew, their performance plateaued. To counter this, they hired Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. With unparalleled experience in inbound lead gen for B2B companies, Directive was able to increase Aegis's monthly online leads by 457%, while at the same time lowering their cost per lead by 147%. Now, I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
With the goal of getting yourself positioned, you're looking to get in front of a target audience. Whenever someone's looking at that and looking at the characteristics of a target audience, what's some of the things that you think they should be considering?
Yeah, so gathering data or information on your existing or potential customers is very important. And common targets for this are defining their age, gender, ethnicity, marital status, education level, and so on. And gathering this information builds a great file or avatar to review, for you to use as a template for your audience whenever you're contemplating promotional methods for targeting them. And it's also to remember that although we use these attributes, age and gender and et cetera, to define your audiences, but overall, like a key element that is responsible for developing who we are as people is our cultural upbringing. So although we can define, age and gender and marital status, it's important to keep in mind that the cultural upbringing plays a huge role in who we are as people and the things we support and get behind, i.e., brands.
Mm. And so it's really someone's set of values can almost be a demographic differentiator in and of itself.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. So, when people, say our listeners are hearing this and they're wanting to consider their existing brand, or maybe they might be in the process of launching a new project, what are some of the things that they can do to optimize their effectiveness for their marketing or promotional efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the first thing that they can do is understand that the communication should be a strategic process. Your ideal customer may not be in the places that you're targeting sometimes. So you may not need to use every social platform available. And for example, if your customer may have a huge presence on Instagram and not on Twitter, so resulting in you needing to put more, of a promotional effort behind Instagram or vice versa. So like knowing who you are and who you're targeting helps you with that because it allows you to properly research your audience and create a strategy targeting exactly who and where your investment is going to make the most sense instead of investing money in places that may be of no use.
That makes sense. It's obvious that you're a branding expert and you help businesses with the framework that you just brought us through. What in your background kind of got you passionate about this?
Yeah, so a lot of times we can take our failures and allow them to catapult us into, I guess, maybe to where we should be or should be heading, professionally or just in life in general. And
Sure.
I began as a serial entrepreneur, starting in college with a group of friends, and we had the honor of creating a few things, pitching, getting angel funding, and just going through that whole process. And that initiative, that project, kind of fizzled out, and then we did another, and over time that fizzled. And I got to a point to where I had to step back and see or ask myself, like, what is really happening? What is going on that's causing these companies and things to not work the way they were wanting? And what I found is that we really didn't have an understanding of those four elements that I mentioned before: our brand DNA, our target audience, our messaging, and our communication strategy, which left us in bad shape. And any company that's in that position is on its way out of business or on its way to allow a competitor or someone who does know those four and have those defined to move past them. So once I understood that the area that we were lacking, I really just dove into learning everything that I could, on the branding side. And I've been just passing this on to other entrepreneurs, others who are starting companies, and then also looking to rebrand and reposition their companies in the market. And it's a great thing to talk branding on a daily basis.
Absolutely. It's a fun one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If someone in the audience is, sitting there, they think that they have an established brand, they think that they might be in trouble because some of these building blocks and some of these, identifications are not in place. What would be, your advice or your motivation to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say you take a step back. If you have some things that are currently working or quote unquote paying the bills, like keep them going. But while that is happening, really take a step back and ask yourself, who we are or who's our target, like where are we wanting to head, and kind of just look at your current situation and say, yes, we are on that path, or we're not, or I'm not even for sure. And if you're not for sure, or if you're not on the right path, there's no need to panic. You have the ability to, again, step back and invest time in defining these areas in which you may be lacking in. And, a great thing about entrepreneurship is that with any idea or business, we have the power to pivot, because as we grow, the more we experience, the more we grow, we're able to kind of optimize what we're doing and pivot in certain instances. So, I always encourage, small pivots, continue just becoming more knowledgeable in whatever it is that you're specializing in, and, make those pivots where necessary and continue to move forward.
I love that. Antoine, this has been a great conversation, and I really love your perspective on branding. Thanks for unpacking those common mistakes and how we can, avoid them. If anybody has any questions or wants to follow up with you, what would be the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so you can visit culturalsync.com to learn more about our consulting, private workshops, and one-on-one coaching. And to get in contact with me personally, my handle on all social platforms is Antoine Woods Jr., all one word. And you can also visit culturalsync.com/founder to email me directly. And I also have a free resource to your listeners today. It's a free brand audit document, and that can be downloaded for free at culturalsync.com/B2B growth.
Fantastic. Well, Antoine, I really appreciate you providing that resource for our listeners. Definitely encourage you guys to go and check that out and connect with him. And thanks so much again for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.